I never thought I would be here, sharing my story with strangers on the internet. But I need some advice and maybe just a place to vent. My name is Mike, and I'm 40 years old. I've been married to Rachel for 10 years, and we've been together for 13. We have two wonderful kids, Nathan and Emily. And until recently, I thought we had a pretty solid marriage. Rachel and I always had a good relationship, or so I thought. We communicated well, supported each other's careers, and shared the responsibilities of raising our kids. She's a few years older than me, 43, and she's the primary breadwinner, which never bothered me. I work from home, handling most of the childcare, shopping, and housework. I always believed we had a balanced, happy life, but lately things have felt off. It started a couple of months ago when Rachel began acting distant. She seemed irritable, picking fights over nothing, and our sex life dropped to zero. At first, I thought it was just work stress or maybe something personal she wasn't ready to talk about. I gave her space, thinking she'd come around. But things didn't get better. The real red flags started when Rachel began spending more time away from home. She'd go out in the evenings saying she needed to buy stuff for the house or meet up with friends. Oddly, she'd dress up for these outings in ways she never did for our usual grocery runs or coffee dates. Last night was the breaking point for me. She went out with a male friend he'd never heard of, supposedly to pick up some things for the house. She spent hours getting ready, putting on makeup and wearing lingerie I thought she reserved for our private moments. When she finally left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I've always trusted Rachel, but my gut was screaming that something was up. After she left, I started to notice little things. Her phone, which she used to leave lying around, was now always with her, locked and on silent. I remembered seeing a name pop up in her texts a few months ago, a work friend she often mentioned needing to talk to about projects. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now it seems suspicious. When Rachel came home, I tried to talk to her about where she'd been and who she was with. She was evasive, giving me vague answers and insisting she just needed time for herself. She refused to give me any details about this friend, which only made me more suspicious. I felt like I was losing my mind. Here I was, doing everything I could to keep our household running smoothly, and she was keeping secrets. I'm at a loss. Part of me wants to confront her directly, demand the truth, but another part of me is scared of what I might find out. I don't want to break up our family, but I also can't live like this, constantly wondering and doubting. I'm hoping that sharing my story here will help me figure out what to do next. Thanks for reading, and I'll update you all as things progress. So after I posted last time, things got even weirder at home. Rachel continued to go out frequently, always with vague explanations and no real details. My suspicion grew stronger every day, and I knew I had to find out what was really going on. It felt wrong to snoop, but I was desperate for answers. One evening, Rachel went out again, claiming she was meeting a friend for dinner. As soon as she left, I decided to check her phone. She had started using a password, but I managed to guess it on the second try. My hands were shaking as I navigated through her apps, feeling like a detective in my own home. I opened her messages and found a string of texts with someone named Eric. They had been chatting for months, and the conversations were anything but professional. Flirty messages, intimate confessions, and plans to meet up. My heart sank as I scrolled through them, each message confirming my worst fears. There were photos, too. Selfies of Rachel smiling at a cafe, her reflection in a hotel mirror. I felt like I was going to be sick. I sat on our bed, staring at the phone in disbelief. This was my wife, the mother of my children, and she was living a double life. I felt a wave of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal. I couldn't believe she would do this to me, to us. All those nights I stayed up worrying about her, she was with him. Rachel came home late that night, her demeanor as cold and detached as ever. I couldn't bring myself to confront her right away. I needed more time to process everything. I started to gather more evidence, screenshotting the texts and photos, saving them to my computer. I knew I had to be prepared for whatever came next. Over the next few days, I noticed more signs. Rachel's behavior was erratic. She was constantly checking her phone, smiling at messages she refused to share with me. Our conversations became even more strained. She was always defensive, turning small disagreements into full-blown arguments. It was like she was trying to push me away, to make me the bad guy. One night, while she was in the shower, I checked her phone again. This time, I found an email thread between her and Eric. They were planning a weekend getaway, discussing hotels and flights. My blood boiled. It was clear that this was more than just an emotional affair. They had been meeting up, spending nights together, and now they were planning to take it to another level. I couldn't take it anymore. I printed out the emails, the texts, and the photos, and I confronted her the next morning. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, when I dropped the stack of papers in front of her. The look on her face when she saw what I had in my hands was one of sheer panic. "Care to explain this, Rachel?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. She looked at the papers, then at me, her eyes wide. "Mike, I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months? That you're having an affair with some guy named Eric? How could you do this to me? To our family?" My voice was rising, and I struggled to keep my emotions in check. Rachel's expression shifted from panic to defiance. "It's not what you think," she said, but I could see through her lies. "Really?" "Because it looks pretty clear to me," I said, pointing to the emails. "You're planning a romantic getaway with him. How do you expect me to believe anything you say?" She sighed, finally breaking down. "Mike, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt so lonely. You're always busy with work and the kids, and I needed someone to talk to, someone who understood me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you turned to him, instead of talking to me, your husband? You betrayed me, Rachel. How can you justify that?" She started to cry, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I was too hurt, too angry. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Mike. Please, can we work this out?" I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to throw her out, to end it right then and there. But another part of me, the part that remembered the good times, wanted to believe that we could somehow fix this. "I don't know, Rachel," I said finally. "I need time to think. You need to stop seeing him, and we need to figure out what's next." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I'll do whatever it takes, Mike. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." I left the house, needing to clear my head. As I drove aimlessly, I wondered if I could ever trust her again, if our marriage could survive this. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. The drive was a blur of emotions. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, anger, and a deep sense of loss. I parked at a nearby park, needing to be anywhere but home. I sat on a bench, watching people jog by, children playing, families laughing, everything I felt slipping away from me. After a few hours, I headed back, still unsure of what I was going to say to Rachel. When I walked in, Rachel was sitting on the couch, her face tear-streaked, holding the printed emails and texts. She looked up at me, eyes pleading. "Mike, we need to talk." I took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "Yeah, we do." She took a shaky breath. "I know I've hurt you. I don't even know where to start, but I want to try and explain." "Explain what, Rachel? That you cheated? That you lied to me for months? How do you even begin to justify that?" My voice was harsher than I intended, but I couldn't help it. The pain was too raw. She looked down, fiddling with her hands. I felt so alone. "You're always busy, always preoccupied with work and the kids." I felt invisible, like I didn't matter. I shook my head. "You didn't come to me, Rachel. You didn't tell me how you felt. Instead, you went to him." "I know," she whispered, tears falling again. "I know I should have come to you. I was scared you wouldn't understand, that you'd brush me off. Brush you off. I've always been here, Rachel. I've always supported you. How could you think I wouldn't care?" She wiped her tears, looking me in the eye for the first time. "I made a mistake, Mike. A huge mistake. I thought I was finding a way to cope, but I see now that I was just running away from our problems." I sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "So, what now? You've been seeing him for months. How do we move past this?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I ended things with Eric. I told him I couldn't see him anymore. I want to fix this, Mike. I want to fix us. How do I trust you again, Rachel? How do I know you won't just run back to him or someone else the next time things get tough?" She reached out to me, but I pulled back, unable to accept her touch. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," she said. "Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. It'll prove to you that I'm committed to making this right." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, now a stranger to me. "This isn't just about you proving yourself, Rachel. This is about rebuilding something you broke. Trust takes time. And right now, I don't know if we can get back to where we were." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I understand. I just want a chance to try. I stood up, needing to put some distance between us. I need time to think. I'll stay in the guest room for now. We can talk more tomorrow. Rachel nodded, looking defeated. Okay, Mike, take all the time you need. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I felt betrayed, angry, and hurt. But there was also a part of me that remembered the good times, the love we once shared. I wasn't sure if that was enough to get us through this, but I knew I needed to try for myself, for our kids, and maybe even for Rachel. The next morning, Rachel was already up making breakfast. The smell of pancakes filled the house, a stark contrast to the tension hanging in the air. I joined her in the kitchen, and we sat down to eat in silence. Finally, Rachel spoke. I've made an appointment with a marriage counselor. I hope you'll come with me. I nodded. I'll go. But Rachel, this isn't going to be easy. I'm still hurt, and it's going to take time for me to even begin to trust you again. I know, she said softly. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. The days that followed were a mix of awkward conversations and attempts to rebuild our lives. We went to counseling, where we both aired our grievances and tried to understand where things had gone wrong. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wondered if it was worth it. One evening after the kids were in bed, Rachel came to me. Mike, I know I've lost your trust. I know I've hurt you deeply, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making this right. I love you, and I don't want to lose you. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, Rachel, but I'm willing to try, for the sake of our family. She nodded, tears welling up. That's all I can ask for? As the weeks turned into months, we continued to work on our marriage. There were good days and bad days, moments of hope and moments of despair. But through it all, we kept trying, holding on to the belief that we could rebuild what was broken. The emotional roller coaster of those first few weeks was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Some days I felt like we were making progress, like maybe we could salvage what was left of our marriage. Other days, the betrayal felt too raw, too insurmountable. I couldn't help but replay the moments in my mind. Rachel's secretive behavior, the messages, the lies, it consumed me. Rachel did her best to show she was committed to making things right. She attended every counseling session, opened up about her feelings, and tried to be transparent. She even changed her phone number and deleted all her social media accounts to reassure me that she was cutting all ties with Eric. But despite her efforts, I struggled to believe in her sincerity. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I questioned everything, our past, our present, our future. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of doubts and insecurities. The woman I had trusted with my life had betrayed me in the worst possible way. How could I ever feel safe again? One night, as I lay in bed in the guest room, I heard a soft knock on the door. It was Rachel. She stood there looking vulnerable, clutching a pillow to her chest. Can we talk? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, motioning for her to sit down. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at her hands. I know I've hurt you deeply, she began, tears welling up in her eyes. I hate myself for what I've done. Every day I see the pain in your eyes, and it kills me. I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to do anything to try. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Rachel, it's not just about what you did. It's about the trust you broke. I feel like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to hurt me again. She reached out, taking my hand in hers. I understand, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not giving up on us. I squeezed her hand, feeling a mix of anger and longing. It's going to take time, Rachel, a lot of time, and I need you to be patient with me, to understand that some days will be harder than others. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise, Mike. I'll do whatever it takes. As the weeks turned into months, we continued our journey through counseling and healing. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wanted to walk away, to leave the pain behind. But then I'd think about our kids, about the life we had built together, and I'd find the strength to keep going. One day, during a particularly tough counseling session, our therapist asked us to write letters to each other, expressing our feelings without holding back. I poured my heart into that letter, laying bare my pain, my anger, and my hope. Writing it was cathartic, a way to release the emotions that had been suffocating me. Rachel's letter to me was filled with remorse and a deep desire to make amends. She acknowledged her mistakes and promised to work on rebuilding our trust. Reading her words, I felt a glimmer of hope, a small flicker of the love we once shared. We started to have more honest conversations, talking about our fears and insecurities. Rachel admitted that she had been feeling neglected and unloved, and that her affair was a misguided attempt to fill a void. I, in turn, acknowledged that I had been so focused on providing for our family that I had neglected our relationship. We both had our faults, and recognizing them was the first step towards healing. There were still days when the pain felt unbearable, when I questioned if we were doing the right thing. But there were also moments of connection, of genuine laughter and affection. Slowly, I started to see glimpses of the Rachel I had fallen in love with, and I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rachel took my hand. I know I've said this before, but I need you to know how truly sorry I am. I love you, Mike, and I'm committed to rebuilding our marriage no matter how long it takes. I looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and the pain. I love you too, Rachel. I'm willing to keep trying, to see if we can find our way back. She smiled through her tears, squeezing my hand. Thank you, Mike. That's all I can ask for. The road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges, but with each passing day, we took small steps towards healing. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but we were committed to trying. And sometimes, that's enough. As the months went by, Rachel and I continued to navigate the rocky terrain of rebuilding our marriage. Counseling sessions became a regular part of our lives, a space where we could openly discuss our feelings and work on our issues. It was grueling, but it was also necessary. Slowly, I began to feel some semblance of stability returning to our relationship. One night, after the kids were in bed, Rachel and I sat down for another serious conversation. We'd been avoiding the topic for a while, but it was time to address the elephant in the room. Our future. Mike, we've been through so much these past few months, Rachel began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. I know I've asked a lot of you, and I'm grateful for your patience and willingness to try. But I think we need to make a decision about where we go from here. I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I've been thinking about that a lot too. I want to believe we can make this work, Rachel. But trust is something that takes time to rebuild, and I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again. She looked down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I understand. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I broke our trust and how hard it's been for you. I know I can't erase what I did, but I want to keep trying, for us and for the kids. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our words hanging in the air. Finally, I spoke. I think we need to take a break, Rachel. Some time apart to figure out what we really want and if we can truly move past this. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. If that's what you need, Mike, I'll respect it. I want you to be sure about us, and if that means taking a step back, then I'm willing to do it. We discussed the logistics of a separation. I would stay in the guest room while we figured out a more permanent arrangement. We agreed to continue counseling separately and together, hoping it would provide clarity. The next few weeks were challenging. Living in the same house but essentially leading separate lives was painful. The kids sensed the tension, and we did our best to shield them from the worst of it. We took turns spending time with them, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. During this period, I reflected deeply on our relationship, our past, and what I wanted for the future. I spent time with friends, sought advice from family, and focused on self-care. I even went on a few dates, trying to see if I could envision a life without Rachel. It was strange and awkward, but it helped me gain some perspective. Rachel, for her part, immersed herself in counseling and spent more time with the kids. She also began volunteering at a local shelter, trying to find ways to give back and regain a sense of purpose. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Rachel approached me. Mike, can we talk? I nodded, motioning for her to sit down. What's on your mind? I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize that I need to let you go, she said, her voice breaking. You deserve to be happy, and I don't want to hold you back. If that means ending our marriage, then I'm willing to do that. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been preparing myself for this possibility, but hearing it from her made it all too real. Rachel, are you sure? This isn't an easy decision, and it's not one we should make lightly. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm sure, Mike. I love you, and I always will. But I don't want to be the source of your pain anymore. I want you to find happiness even if it's not with me. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. I love you too, Rachel, and I want you to be happy as well. Maybe this is the best thing for both of us. We sat in silence, holding hands, mourning the end of our marriage. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with sadness, but also a glimmer of hope for the future. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, dividing assets, and figuring out co-parenting arrangements. It was painful and exhausting, but we managed to get through it with minimal conflict. We both wanted what was best for the kids, and that remained our top priority. On the day our divorce was finalized, Rachel and I met for coffee. It was a symbolic gesture, a way to acknowledge the end of our journey together and the beginning of our new lives. Here's to new beginnings, I said, raising my cup. To new beginnings, Rachel echoed, a small smile on her lips. As I walked away from that meeting, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a strange sense of peace. Our marriage was over, but I had hope for the future. I had learned a lot about myself, about love, and about what I wanted in a relationship. In the months that followed, Rachel and I maintained a cordial relationship for the sake of our kids. We attended school events together, coordinated holidays, and did our best to provide a stable environment for Nathan and Emily. As for me, I continued to explore new opportunities and build a life on my own terms. I reconnected with old friends, pursued hobbies I had long neglected, and eventually started dating again. It was a slow process, but with time, I began to heal. Time is a funny thing. It feels like the days drag on forever when you're in pain, but then you blink and months have passed. The wounds from Rachel's betrayal didn't heal overnight, but they did start to mend with each passing day. I found solace in routine, work, spending time with the kids, and rediscovering hobbies that brought me joy. Little by little, life started to feel normal again, even if it was a new kind of normal. Rachel and I settled into our roles as co-parents. We communicated effectively about the kids and maintained a respectful distance otherwise. It was strange at first, but we both adjusted. There were no more explosive fights or tearful confrontations. We were simply two people doing their best to raise their children in the aftermath of a broken marriage. Nathan and Emily were resilient. Kids are incredible that way. They adapted to the new arrangement better than I could have hoped. We made sure they felt loved and supported, no matter what. Rachel and I both attended their soccer games, school plays, and parent-teacher conferences, presenting a united front for their sake. One evening, a few months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting on the porch with a beer in hand, reflecting on everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a message from an old friend, inviting me to a small gathering. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to go. It was time to start living again. At the gathering, I reconnected with people I hadn't seen in years. It felt good to be out, to laugh and enjoy myself without the weight of my failed marriage hanging over me. That night, I met someone new. Her name was Emily. Funny coincidence, considering my daughter's name. And we hit it off immediately. She was smart, kind, and had a way of making everyone around her feel at ease. Emily and I started seeing each other casually. I was upfront about my recent divorce, and she respected my need to take things slow. Our relationship was easy, uncomplicated, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of genuine happiness. Meanwhile, Rachel continued her work at the shelter and focused on her own healing. We had a candid conversation about our paths forward and agreed to support each other as co-parents while pursuing our own happiness. There was no animosity, just a mutual understanding that we had done our best and that it was time to move on. I remember one particular evening vividly. I was having dinner with Emily at a cozy little restaurant downtown. We were talking about our favorite books when my phone buzzed. It was a picture from Rachel, Nathan, and Emily, smiling brightly, holding up their latest art projects. It was a simple moment, but it brought tears to my eyes. Despite everything, our kids were happy, and that was all that mattered. Emily noticed my reaction and reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, smiling through the tears. "Yeah, everything's okay. Better than okay, actually." She smiled back, understanding without needing words. In that moment, I realized just how far I had come. The pain of Rachel's betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was rebuilding my life piece by piece, and I was surrounded by people who cared about me. Months turned into a year, and life continued to improve. Rachel and I maintained a cordial relationship, and our kids were thriving. Emily became a significant part of my life, and our relationship grew deeper and more meaningful. She brought a lightness to my days that I hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon, while hiking with Emily, she stopped and turned to me, a serious look on her face. "Mike, I know we've been taking things slow, and I appreciate that, but I want you to know that I'm all in. I love you, and I'm here for the long haul." Her words took my breath away. I realized then that I loved her too. "I love you, Emily," I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Thank you for being patient with me, for understanding." She smiled against my shoulder. "You're worth it, Mike. Every bit of it." As we continued our hike, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't known in years. Life was moving forward, and I was ready for whatever came next. Rachel and I eventually reached a point where we could talk without any lingering tension. We even managed to share a few laughs at family gatherings, finding a new kind of friendship in the aftermath of our marriage. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than I could have hoped for. One evening, after dropping the kids off at Rachel's, she pulled me aside. "Mike, I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for being a great father, for forgiving me, and for giving me a chance to make things right with the kids." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. "Thank you, Rachel, for being a great mother and for working with me to make sure the kids are happy. I think we did okay." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yeah, I think we did." Driving home that night, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The past was finally behind me, and I was ready to fully embrace the future. Emily and I eventually moved in together, blending our lives seamlessly. She was wonderful with Nathan and Emily, and they adored her. Our home was filled with laughter and love, a stark contrast to the tension and pain of the past. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over our yard, I reflected on the journey I had been on. From the depths of betrayal and heartbreak to the heights of new love and happiness, it had been a long road, but I had made it. We all had. To anyone going through a similar situation, know this: it gets better. The pain doesn't last forever, and there is always hope for a brighter future. Trust yourself, lean on those who care about you, and never stop believing that you deserve happiness. Life moves on, and so will you. It's not an easy journey, but it's worth it. In the end, you'll find strength you never knew you had, and you'll emerge stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life has in store.